The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room that any human had ever seen. It stretched for almost a kilometer, with walls made of pure crystal that caught the light and scattered it into 1,000 colors. The ceiling rose so high that clouds of mist floated near the top, giving the whole place a feeling of being inside a mountain rather than a building. Ambassador Cole stood at the central podium, feeling very small. She was 42 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a simple style and wearing the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Behind her, a holographic screen showed images of Earth, its blue oceans and green continents looking fragile against the blackness of space. Around her, arranged in rising tiers like a stadium, sat representatives from 47 different alien species. Some looked almost human, most did not. There were snake-like creatures with scales that changed color with their moods. They had bodies like giant octopuses, with dozens of tentacles that never stopped moving. They were made of living crystal, their bodies reflecting light in ways that hurt human eyes to look at for too long. Had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years of learning alien languages, studying alien customs, and practicing what she would say. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 5 years ago, when a scientist named Doctor had accidentally created a working warp drive in his laboratory. Since then, humans had been reaching out to the stars, eager to meet their galactic neighbors. The neighbors, it turned out, had been watching humanity for a very long time. They had simply never considered humans worth talking to. Distinguished members of the Galactic Council, said, her voice amplified by the chamber's sound system so that every being could hear her. I come before you today as a representative of the human species. We request associate membership in your council. We come in peace, seeking only to learn from your wisdom and to contribute whatever we can to the greater galactic community. She paused, waiting for a response. For a long moment there was only silence. Then a sound began from the left side of the chamber where the delegation sat. It was a wet, bubbling noise, like water going down a drain. Did not understand what it meant until her translator device kicked in and she realized with horror that they were laughing. The laughter spread. They made hissing sounds that their scales turned bright yellow with amusement. They rumbled like distant thunder. Even species that had never seen before joined in, their alien voices creating a chorus of mockery that filled the entire chamber. High Speaker, the leader of the delegation and one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, rose from his coiled position. His scales shimmered with green and gold as he looked down with eyes that held no warmth. The human requests membership, said, his forked tongue flickering with each word. How charming, how absolutely adorable. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Let me explain something to you, little human, continued. Your species discovered interstellar travel 5 of your years ago. The Dominion has existed for 600,000 years. The hegemony has been exploring the stars for 400,000 years. The collective predates both of us by millions of years. Do you understand what I am saying? Nodded slowly, her face carefully neutral. I understand that we are young compared to your civilizations, High Speaker, but age alone does not determine worth. Does it not? Slithered closer to the podium, his massive body moving with disturbing grace. Your species still fights wars among yourselves over patches of dirt and imaginary lines on maps. You poison your own planet with pollution. You let your own kind starve while others grow fat with excess. And you dare to ask for a seat at this table. We are not perfect, admitted, but we are learning, we are growing. We believe that contact with more advanced civilizations will help us become better than we are. Become better, the representative, a mass of gray tentacles named, spoke up from across the chamber. Little human, my species was building cities on 100 worlds before your ancestors discovered fire. The idea that we would waste our time helping you grow is laughable. Perhaps, said the ambassador, his voice like grinding rocks, you should return to your little planet and wait. Come back in 1,000,000 years. If you have not destroyed yourselves by then, perhaps we will consider speaking to you as equals." Felt anger building inside her chest, but she forced it down. She had been warned that this might happen. The older species looked down on younger ones. It was the way of the galaxy. But she had hoped, foolishly it now seemed, that humanity's eagerness to learn would count for something. "I ask only for a fair hearing," she said, "a chance to prove what humanity can offer." Laughed again, a cold, hissing sound. "Very well, little human. Let us vote. All those in favor of granting humanity associate membership status." Looked around the chamber. Not a single representative raised a hand, tentacle, or appendage. All those opposed. Every delegation voted against. 47 species, unanimous in their rejection. "The motion fails," announced with obvious pleasure. "Humanity's petition is, you may leave now, Ambassador, and I would advise you to take the long way home. The galaxy can be a dangerous place for species that do not know their proper place in the order of things." Gathered her materials slowly, refusing to show how much the rejection hurt. As she walked toward the exit, she passed close to the delegation. Leaned down, bringing his face close to hers. "A word of advice," he whispered, his breath smelling of something sharp and chemical. "Stay in your solar system, human. Build your little ships and play your little games, but do not venture out into the galaxy again. The universe does not need another failed species cluttering up the fossil record." Said nothing. She walked with her head high, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence of the chamber until she reached the doors. They opened automatically, and she stepped through without looking back. Her aide, Danny Reeves, was waiting in the corridor. He was a young man, barely 25, with red hair and a face full of freckles. He had been packing nervously the entire time was inside. "How did it go?" he asked, though one look at her face told him the answer. "They laughed at us," said quietly. "They actually laughed." Danny's hands clenched into fists. "What do we do now? Go home and accept that we are not welcome in the galaxy?" Was quiet for a long moment. She stood in the corridor of an alien space station, surrounded by technology that humans could barely understand, rejected by species that saw humanity as nothing more than clever animals. By all logic, she should have felt defeated. Instead, something else was growing inside her, something that felt like cold fire. "No," she said finally, "we do not accept anything. We go home, Danny, but not to give up." "Then why?" Turned to face him, and Danny saw something in her eyes that he had never seen before. It was not anger, exactly, though anger was part of it. It was something harder, something that would not bend or break no matter what the universe threw at it. "We go home to prepare," said. "They think we are children. Fine. Let them think that. But one day, Danny, one day very soon in galactic terms, we are going to show them exactly what humanity can do when it has something to prove." She started walking toward the shuttle bay, her steps quick and purposeful. "And when that day comes," she added softly, "they will never laugh at us again." 50 years passed on Earth, but to the ancient species of the Galactic Council, it was barely the blink of an eye. They measured their lives in thousands of years. They had existed for so long that they had stopped keeping track of time altogether. For them, 50 years was nothing, a brief moment, a single breath in the long life of the universe. They had already forgotten about humanity. The rejection of Earth's petition had been filed away in some dusty archive, just another footnote in the endless records of galactic bureaucracy. The Council had more important things to worry about than a young species on a small planet at the edge of the galaxy. But on Earth, those 50 years burned like a fire that would not go out. Admiral Victor Hayes stood on the observation deck of Sentinel Station, humanity's largest military base in orbit around Earth. He was 62 years old, with gray hair cut short, and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His eyes, dark brown and sharp, stared out at the stars as if he could see enemies hiding among them. Behind him, the station hummed with activity. Thousands of men and women worked at their stations, monitoring screens, checking systems, and preparing for something that most of the galaxy did not believe was possible. "Status report," Victor said without turning around. Commander Grant stepped up beside him. She was in her 40s, with black hair streaked with silver and the calm expression of someone who had seen too much to be surprised by anything anymore. She held a tablet computer in her hands, its screen glowing with data. "The 7th Fleet has completed integration of the new drive systems," she said. "All vessels are now equipped with transdimensional jump capability. We can put any ship anywhere in the galaxy within 15 minutes." Victor nodded slowly. Transdimensional propulsion was humanity's first major breakthrough, discovered by accident when a research team was trying to improve their warp drives. Instead of bending space or folding it humans had found a way to cut through reality itself. It was faster than anything else in the galaxy, and no other species had managed to duplicate it. Weapon systems. Kinetic accelerators have been upgraded across all fleet vessels. The new targeting computers can track and engage 300 separate targets at the same time. Each ship is essentially a mobile weapons platform capable of fighting an entire enemy squadron alone. And Project Whisper hesitated for just a moment before answering. "The stealth technology is performing beyond our best predictions. In testing, a fully armed battleship was able to approach within 500 meters of our most advanced sensors without being detected. For all practical purposes, our ships can become invisible." Victor allowed himself a small smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had spent his entire career preparing for a war that he hoped would never come but knew probably would. When Cole had returned from the Galactic Council 50 years ago, she had told Earth's leaders exactly what had happened. She had told them about the laughter, the mockery, and the threats. She had told them that the galaxy viewed humanity as nothing more than insects to be ignored or crushed, depending on the mood of the larger species. The response had been unlike anything in human history. Nations that had been enemies for centuries suddenly found common ground. Resources that had been wasted on petty conflicts were redirected toward a single goal. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and ordinary citizens all came together with one shared purpose. Humanity would never be laughed at again. "There is something else," said carefully. "Our intelligence assets in space have reported some concerning movements." Victor turned to face her fully. "What kind of movements?" High Speaker has been pushing for what he calls a preemptive action against human space. He claims that our rapid technological advancement represents a threat to galactic stability. He wants the Council to authorize a quarantine of our solar system before we become, in his words, too dangerous to contain. "A quarantine," Victor repeated, "by which he means a blockade, and after the blockade, what? An invasion." "That seems to be the eventual plan, yes. The support the idea. The think it is premature, but they have not said they oppose it. Several smaller species are undecided." Paused. "The vote is scheduled for next month." Victor was quiet for a long moment. Outside the viewport, he could see Earth turning slowly below them. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. 8 billion people living their lives, most of them with no idea how close they might be to war. "How many ships do we have operational right now?" he asked. 842 capital ships, 4,000 support vessels. Our drone factories can produce nearly unlimited automated fighters if needed. And them. The Dominion alone has over 12,000 capital ships. If the entire Council acts together, they could field hundreds of thousands of vessels against us. Victor nodded. He had known the numbers for years. On paper, humanity had no chance. A fleet of 800 ships against hundreds of thousands was not a battle, it was suicide. But Victor also knew something that the Galactic Council did not. Numbers were not everything. The Council had been fighting the same enemies using the same tactics for 100,000 years. They had grown comfortable, predictable, and lazy. Their technology had not changed significantly because they saw no need to change it. Why fix something that was not broken? Humanity, on the other hand, had spent 50 years doing nothing but changing. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology had been designed from the ground up to fight an enemy with superior numbers. Their strategies were based not on matching the enemy ship for ship, but on striking fast, hitting hard, and disappearing before the enemy could respond. "Send a message to all fleet commanders," Victor said. "Code designation Awakening. Tell them to begin final preparations." His eyes widened slightly. "Sir, are we really going to war with the entire galaxy?" Victor turned back to the viewport, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the species that had mocked humanity were debating whether to cage them or destroy them. They saw humans as animals, as insects, as children who did not know their place. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "We are not going to war," Victor said quietly. "Not unless they force us to, but we are going to show the galaxy that humanity is not a species to be mocked, caged, or destroyed. We are going to make them understand that the universe has changed, whether they like it or not. And if they attack first..." Victor's jaw tightened. "Then we will remind them why predators should be careful about what prey they choose to hunt." He turned away from the viewport and walked toward the command center, his footsteps heavy with the weight of what was coming. 50 years of preparation, 50 years of sacrifice and hard work and endless training. It had all been leading to this moment. Somewhere in the galaxy, High Speaker was planning humanity's destruction. He probably thought it would be easy. He probably imagined human ships burning, human cities falling, human civilization collapsing under the weight of superior firepower. He had no idea what was coming. Watched the Admiral go, then looked out at the stars herself. She thought about her children, about all the generations of humans who would come after her. They would either live in a galaxy that respected them, or they would not live at all. There was no middle ground anymore. She straightened her uniform and followed the Admiral toward the command center. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it together. They had spent 50 years preparing for this fight. Now it was time to see if that preparation had been enough. The patrol fleet dropped out of warp space on the edge of the Sol system, their sensors immediately beginning to scan everything within range. There were 15 ships in the fleet, each one a predator designed for speed and violence. Their hulls were smooth and gray, shaped like teardrops with weapons bristling from every surface. Fleet Commander sat in his command chair, his tentacles wrapped around the control arms as he watched the data stream across his screens. He had been given a simple mission by the Council: travel to the human home system, assess their military capabilities, and identify targets for the upcoming quarantine action. It was supposed to be routine, easy, the kind of mission that young officers begged for because it looked good on their records without any real danger. "Status demanded." "Scans complete, Commander," his sensor officer reported. The young was barely out of training, his tentacles still showing the pink color of youth. "I am detecting the human on the inner edge of the system. There is some primitive orbital infrastructure, scattered settlements on nearby moons and planets." He paused, confusion evident in his voice. "No military vessels detected." Flexed his tentacles in satisfaction, just as he had expected. The humans had probably hidden their pathetic little fleet somewhere deeper in the system, hopping to avoid detection. It was what a primitive species would do when faced with a superior enemy. "Deploy long-range probes," ordered. "I want a complete survey of this system. Find their ships, find their bases, find anything that might be worth destroying when the quarantine force arrives." "Yes, Commander, deploying probes now." Leaned back in his chair, already composing the report he would send to the Council. The humans were even more primitive than expected. Their home system was barely defended. The quarantine would be simple. Perhaps he would even recommend that the council skip the quarantine entirely and proceed directly to elimination. Why waste resources on containment when extinction would be so much easier? Commander, the sensor officer's voice was suddenly sharp with alarm. New contacts. Where? How many? Everywhere, Commander. They are appearing all around us. Spun his chair toward the main, and his tentacles went rigid with shock. The space around his fleet had suddenly come alive with light. Where there had been nothing a moment ago, there were now ships. Hundreds of ships, arranged in a perfect sphere that completely surrounded the patrol fleet. They had simply appeared without warning, without any detectable transition signature, without anything at all to indicate their presence. One moment empty space, the next moment an armada. Where did they come from? Demanded, rising from his chair. Our sensors should have detected them before they even entered the system. I do not know, Commander. The sensor officer's tentacles were trembling now, his pink color fading to a terrified white. Our sensors did not detect any approach at all. It is as if they were always here but chose to become visible only now. Stared at trying to understand what he was seeing. The ships were impressive by galactic standards. They were fast, well-armed, and designed to intimidate. But the human vessels were something else entirely. They were black, not just dark but truly black, as if they were made of shadow. They absorbed all light that touched them, making them almost impossible to see against the backdrop of space. And they were huge, dwarfing the cruisers like mountains towering over hills. Commander, we are receiving a communication request. Human text. His mind raced. He had 15 ships. The humans had hundreds. Even if his vessels were more advanced, which he was no longer certain was true, the numbers were impossibly against him. Running was not an option. Fighting was suicide. All he could do was talk. Accept the communication, he said. The flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a woman, perhaps 50 or 60 years old by human standards, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that reminded of the cold void between stars. She wore a dark uniform with no decorations except for a small pin showing the planet Earth. Commander, she said, her voice calm and almost friendly. I am Admiral Monica Price of the United Earth Defense Force. I believe you were looking for our fleet. She spread her arms in a welcoming gesture. Here we are. Tried to keep his voice steady, but he could hear the tremor in it. This is an unprovoked act of aggression. You have surrounded a peaceful patrol fleet in neutral space. The Galactic Council will hear of this. The Galactic Council sent you to spy on us, Monica replied, her smile never wavering. You are here to count our ships, map our defenses, and identify targets for the attack that High Speaker is planning. Please, Commander, let us not pretend that either of us does not know exactly why you are here. You cannot threaten the hegemony. We have the backing of the entire council. You have 12,000 capital ships, yes, we know. Monica leaned forward slightly, her eyes locking onto through the screen. We also know that your shields operate on a resonance frequency of 847.3. We know that your weapons require 0.4 seconds to recharge between shots. We know that your command structure relies on centralized decision-making, which makes you vulnerable to attacks that strike faster than your chain of command can respond. Felt ice spreading through his body. That information was classified at the highest levels. No species outside the hegemony should have access to it. The fact that the humans knew meant that either they had spies embedded deep within military command, or they had technology capable of reading classified systems from a distance. Neither possibility was comforting. What do you want? Asked, abandoning any pretense of authority. Want? We want nothing from you, Commander. We simply want to send a message, and you are going to be our messenger. What message? Monica's smile faded, replaced by an expression of cold seriousness. Return to the Galactic Council. Tell them what you have seen here today. Tell them that humanity is not interested in conquest or revenge. We have no desire to rule the galaxy or destroy other species. We simply want to be left alone to develop in peace." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But also tell them this. We will not be quarantined. We will not be contained. We will not be treated as lesser beings simply because we are young. 50 years ago, High Speaker told our ambassador to stay in our little solar system and evolve for another 1,000,000 years before daring to speak to the council. He was very clear about what he thought of humanity." Monica leaned even closer to the camera, her voice dropping to something just above a whisper. "So here is our response. The Council has 1 standard year to formally apologize for its treatment of humanity and to grant us full membership status with all rights and privileges. Not associate membership, full membership, equal standing with every other species in the galaxy." Made a sound that his translator rendered as disbelieving laughter. "You are making demands of the Galactic Council. You are insane. Even with your invisible ships and your stolen intelligence, you cannot hope to challenge the combined might of 47 spacefaring civilizations." "Perhaps," Monica acknowledged. "But consider this, Commander. Right now, as we speak, a single human vessel is hovering in the atmosphere above the. It appeared there without warning, exactly as these ships appeared around your fleet. It has made no hostile moves. It has issued no threats. It is simply waiting." Its tentacles went completely limp. There was the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. Thousands of warships patrolled its space. Millions of sensor platforms watched for any approaching threat. And yet, a human vessel had simply appeared there, in the heart of enemy territory, as if all those defenses did not exist. 1 year, Monica repeated. "That is how long the Council has to make its decision. If they apologize and grant us membership, the ship will leave and there will be peace. If they refuse, or if they attack us, then we will attend the next council session in person." "And then what?" Monica's cold smile returned. "Then the galaxy will discover exactly what humanity is capable of. And I promise you, Commander, no one will ever laugh at us again." The transmission ended. Before could give any orders, before he could even process what had happened, the human fleet vanished. They did not warp away or jump to hyperspace. They simply ceased to be visible, disappearing as silently and completely as they had appeared. His sensor officer confirmed what already knew. There was no trace of them, no energy signatures, no residual radiation, nothing at all to prove they had ever been there. As his fleet limped back toward space, composed his report with trembling tentacles. He described everything he had seen, everything he had heard, and everything he now believed about humanity's capabilities. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake 50 years ago. They had mocked a young species and told them they were worthless. They had assumed that humanity would simply accept their inferior place in the galactic order. Instead, humanity had spent 50 years preparing for revenge. And now that revenge was coming, whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. The Galactic Council chamber was more crowded than it had been in 3,000 years. Representatives from all 47 member species had gathered, their bodies filling the tiered seating until there was barely room to move. Observers from dozens of non-aligned worlds had also come, drawn by rumors of what was about to happen. The air was thick with tension, fear, and the mixed smells of 100 different alien biologies. High Speaker coiled in his position at the head of the chamber, his scales flickering through colors that showed his anxiety to anyone who knew how to read body language. He had aged badly in the year since Commander had returned with his terrifying report. His scales had lost their luster, and his movements were slow and careful, like those of an old serpent who knew that predators were watching. The report had been suppressed, of course. The Council had agreed that spreading panic would serve no purpose, but rumors had leaked anyway, whispers of human ships that could appear anywhere without warning, Stories of technology that could penetrate the most secure systems in the galaxy. Tales of a species that had spent 50 years preparing for a war that no one else had seen coming. "This emergency session is called to order," announced, his voice lacking the arrogance it had held 50 years ago. "We are here to address the human ultimatum and to determine our collective response. The deadline they gave us expires in 6 hours." Before he could continue, the massive doors at the back of the chamber swung open with a boom that echoed through the entire space. Every eye, sensor, and sensory organ turned to watch as a group of 12 humans walked calmly down the central aisle. They wore simple dark uniforms without any rank insignia or decorations. They walked in perfect formation, their footsteps synchronized, their faces calm and unreadable. At their head was a woman that recognized with a sick feeling in his gut. Cole, the same ambassador he had mocked and dismissed 50 years ago. She had aged, of course. Her hair was now completely white and her face was lined with years, but her eyes were exactly the same. They burned with the same quiet determination he remembered, the same absolute refusal to be broken. "Ambassador Cole," said carefully, "the Council did not invite human representatives to this session." "The Council did not need to invite us," replied. Her voice carried easily through the vast chamber, clear and strong despite her years. "You received our terms 1 year ago. We are here for your answer. The Council has not yet reached a decision on the matter. These things take time to discuss properly and—" "Then allow me to help you reach one." Raised her hand, and the chamber's holographic display system activated without authorization. Dozens of Council technicians began frantically working their controls, trying to regain command of the system, but nothing they did had any effect. The humans had taken control, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. The display showed a star map of the entire Milky Way galaxy, with Council space highlighted in blue. It was a massive territory, spanning hundreds of thousands of light years, containing trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. "For the past year," said, "you have been debating how to respond to our ultimatum. Some of you argued for immediate military action, others counseled patience. A few even suggested that our demands were reasonable and should be accepted." She paused, her eyes scanning the assembly. "But not one of you actually believed that we could back up our ultimatum. You thought we were bluffing." The star map zoomed in, focusing on a specific region of space, though the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. 3 hours ago, a single human vessel entered the home system," continued. "It was not detected by any of your thousands of patrol ships. It was not spotted by any of your millions of sensor platforms. It simply appeared without warning in the atmosphere directly above the capital city." Made a strangled sound. On the display, an image appeared showing the vessel in question. It was enormous, bigger than any ship the Council had ever built, hovering silently above a city of gleaming towers. Beneath it, millions of citizens were looking up in terror at the shadow that had suddenly blocked their sun. "The vessel is still there," said. "It has made no hostile moves. It has fired no weapons. It has issued no threats. It is simply waiting." The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates screamed at each other in a dozen different languages. The representatives demanded immediate military action. The called for calm. They sat silently, their crystalline bodies pulsing with light that no one could interpret. Waited patiently until the noise died down. Then she continued as if there had been no interruption at all. 50 years ago, you asked what humanity could offer the galaxy. You laughed at us. You mocked us. You told us to go home and wait 1,000,000 years before daring to speak to you again." Her voice hardened. "So we went home, and we waited, not for 1,000,000 years, but for 50, and while we waited, we worked." She gestured at the display, which now showed schematics of human technology. Ships that could bend light around themselves to become invisible. Weapons that could crack a planet's crust with a single shot. drive systems that could cross the galaxy in minutes instead of months. You asked what we could offer, repeated. I will tell you, we can offer you peace or we can offer you war. The choice is yours. She stepped forward and her voice softened slightly. We do not want war. We have never wanted war. All we ever wanted was respect, recognition, a chance to be part of something larger than ourselves. You us that chance 50 years ago, and now we are giving you one more opportunity to change your minds. Looked directly at, her eyes boring into his. Full membership in the Galactic Council, complete equality with every other species. A formal apology entered into the Permanent Council record, acknowledging that humanity was treated unfairly and deserves the same rights as everyone else. And if we refuse, asked, his voice barely above a whisper. If you refuse, the ship above you will begin demonstrating exactly what human weapons can do, and then more ships will appear above more worlds, not to conquer them, but to remind every species in this galaxy that humanity is not a species to be trifled with. She paused, letting her words sink in. I am 92 years old. I have spent my entire adult life working toward this moment. I have watched generations of humans sacrifice everything to prepare for this day. Do not make their sacrifice meaningless by choosing pride over wisdom. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate understood the weight of the moment. The future of galactic civilization hung on what happened in the next few minutes. Slowly, painfully, uncoiled from his position, he moved like a being who had finally encountered something he could not outmaneuver, something he could not defeat through cunning or intimidation. The council recognizes, he said, each word sounding like it was being torn from him, that it may have acted hastily in its previous assessment of humanity. We are prepared to discuss revised terms of engagement. Not revised terms, said firmly. Full membership, complete equality, a formal apology, nothing less. Ambassador, you must understand that the Council cannot simply. The Council can do whatever it decides to do. That is what makes it a council. And right now, you need to decide whether you value your pride more than your survival. Was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to face the assembly. I call for a vote on the human petition for full membership status in the Galactic Council, including a formal apology for previous treatment. All in favor. The votes came slowly at first, then faster. The voted yes. Several smaller species followed. Then more and more hands, tentacles, and appendages rose into the air. When the count was finished, 43 species had voted in favor. 3 had abstained. Only 1 had voted against. The motion passes, announced, his voice hollow. Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Allowed herself a small smile. She turned to face Danny Reeves, who had remained by her side through every moment of the past 50 years. His hair was gray now, his face weathered by time, but his eyes were wet with tears. We did it, he whispered. Yes, replied softly, we did. She turned back to face the council, her voice carrying through the suddenly quiet chamber. On behalf of humanity, I accept your decision. We look forward to working with all of you to build a better galaxy. The ship above the will withdraw immediately as a gesture of good faith. She paused, and her smile faded into something more serious. But remember this day. Remember what happened when you underestimated humanity. Remember what happens when you mock a species simply because it is young. Because if you ever forget, if you ever think of treating us or any other young species the way you treated us 50 years ago, we will be happy to remind you. Turned and walked out of the chamber, her delegation following in perfect formation. Behind her, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned silence, trying to understand how everything they had known had just changed forever. 100 years had passed since humanity first asked the Galactic Council for membership. 100 years since the laughter and the mockery. 100 years since Cole walked out of that chamber with fire in her eyes and a promise in her heart. The galaxy was unrecognizable now. Ambassador Dean stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, a massive structure that humanity had built at the intersection of 12 major trade routes. It was one of the largest space stations in the galaxy, home to nearly 500,000 permanent residents from over 60 different species. Through the viewport, he could see ships of every shape and size coming and going, their hulls displaying the colors and symbols of 100 different worlds. Was 45 years old, young for an ambassador but not unusually so. Humans aged differently now. They're extended by medical technologies that had been developed through cooperation with other species. The average human could expect to live well past 150 years in good health, and some were pushing past 200 with the help of advanced treatments. Ambassador Dean turned to find a young diplomat approaching. Her name was, and she moved with the fluid grace that was typical of her species. But there was none of the arrogance that had once defined interactions with other races. Instead, her scales showed the soft blue colors of respect and friendship. Yes, the council is ready to begin the anniversary ceremony. They have requested that you deliver the opening address. Nodded and straightened his collar. 100 years ago, the idea of a human delivering an address to the Galactic Council would have been laughed at. Now it was expected. Humanity had become one of the most influential species in the galaxy, not through conquest or intimidation, but through something much more powerful. They had become partners. The council chamber had changed since humanity's admission. Gone were the intimidating crystalline walls and the tiered seating designed to make younger species feel small. The humans had suggested a new design, and to everyone's surprise, the other species had agreed enthusiastically. Now the chamber was circular, with every representative sitting at the same level, equals in every way that mattered. As took the central podium, he looked out at the assembled delegates. Sat beside humans, their scales showing the calm greens of contentment. Tentacles intertwined with human hands in gestures of friendship. Crystal bodies pulsed with warm light as they conversed with beings who had once considered them too alien to understand. Distinguished colleagues, began. 100 years ago, this council gathered to mock a young species that dared to ask for a seat at the table. Today, we gather to celebrate what that species, together with all of you, has helped to build. He paused, allowing his words to settle over the assembly. Humanity was told that we were infants, that we were too young, too primitive, too aggressive to contribute anything of value to galactic civilization. We were advised to return to our solar system and wait for 1,000,000 years while we evolved into something more acceptable. A ripple of uncomfortable acknowledgement passed through the older species. Many of them remembered those days. Some had even participated in the mockery. Instead of waiting 1,000,000 years, we spent 50 years preparing to prove you wrong. We built ships that could appear anywhere without warning. We developed weapons that could challenge any force in the galaxy. We gathered intelligence that revealed every weakness in your defenses. Paused. We could have used those tools for conquest. Many of you expected us to. He let the silence stretch before continuing. But conquest was never our goal. We did not want to rule the galaxy. We did not want to destroy the species that had mocked us. We wanted something much simpler. We wanted a chance. An opportunity to prove that the value of a species is not measured by how long it has existed, but by what it chooses to do with its existence. Gestured at the assembly around him. Look at what we have achieved together. Diseases that killed billions of beings across the galaxy have been wiped out forever. Trade routes that were once are now highways of commerce and friendship. Species that had not spoken to each other in 10,000 years now share research facilities and schools. Young species that would have been mocked and rejected are now welcomed and supported. He stepped away from the podium and walked among the delegates. Humanity did not accomplish this alone. We could not have done it by ourselves. Every breakthrough, every achievement, every step forward has been the result of working together. They taught us patience and the value of long-term thinking. They taught us about biological harmony and living in balance with our environment. They taught us about the long view of history and the importance of thinking in terms of rather than decades. Stopped in front of the delegation. High Speaker, the successor to who had died peacefully many decades ago, met his gaze without flinching. And in return, continued, humanity taught the galaxy something that many of you had forgotten. We taught you that change is not something to be feared. We showed you that growth is not something to be prevented. We demonstrated that new perspectives are not threats to be destroyed, but gifts to be welcomed. He returned to the podium for his closing words. 100 years ago, humanity answered mockery with preparation. 50 years ago, we answered contempt with capability. Today, we answer the question that was asked at our first council appearance. What does humanity offer the galaxy? Spread his hands wide, encompassing the entire chamber. This, all of this, a future that we are building together, a galaxy united not by conquest or fear, but by shared purpose and mutual respect. That is humanity's answer to the council that once laughed at us, and we are only getting started. The applause began slowly, then built into something tremendous. Every species in the chamber rose to their feet, their hands and tentacles and appendages coming together in appreciation. Stepped down from the podium and was immediately surrounded by delegates who wanted to shake his hand, embrace him, and thank him for words that had captured what everyone was feeling. Later that evening, stood alone on the observation deck, watching ships from 100 different worlds come and go. A familiar humming sound announced the arrival of a hovering chair, and he turned to see an elderly woman approaching. Cole was 142 years old now. Her life extended far beyond what would have been possible a century ago. Her hair was pure white, her face was deeply lined, and she moved only with the help of advanced medical technology. But her eyes were still sharp, still burning with the same determination that had carried her through 50 years of preparation and 50 more years of building. "That was a fine speech," she said. "I might have written something similar myself once upon a time." Smiled, "I learned from the best." "You are too kind to an old woman," guided her chair to a stop beside him, her eyes fixed on the stars. "When I stood in that council chamber all those years ago, I never imagined any of this. I was so angry, so humiliated. All I wanted was to show them that they were wrong about us." "And you did." "No," shook her head slowly. "What I did was start something. The showing took all of us. Every human who worked and sacrificed to build our fleet. Every alien who chose to work with us instead of against us. Every individual, human and otherwise, who decided that the galaxy could be better than it was." She reached out and gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that you will never let humanity forget where we came from, not the mockery. Forget that if you want, but remember the choice. We could have chosen revenge when we had the power. We could have chosen to dominate and destroy. Instead, we chose partnership. We chose to build something together. That choice is what made us worthy of respect. Not our ships, not our weapons, our choice." Squeezed her hand gently. "I promise." Nodded, satisfied. She turned her chair toward the exit, then paused. "One more thing." "Yes." A smile crossed her weathered face. It was the same smile she had worn when she walked out of the council chamber 100 years ago, determined to prove an entire galaxy wrong. "Make sure they never stop laughing," she said. "Just make sure they are laughing with us now, not at us." She glided away, leaving alone with the stars and the weight of 100 years of history. Above him, ships continued their endless dance through the void. Human vessels and alien vessels, working together, traveling together, building together. The galaxy that had once mocked humanity now welcomed them as partners and leaders. The species that had called them infants now looked to them for guidance and innovation. The universe that had seemed so cold and hostile had become a home. All because one woman had refused to accept that her species was worthless. All because one planet had decided that mockery was not the end of the story, but the beginning. The mockery had been answered, and the story was just beginning.